I'm Samantha, 29, and I couldn't help but smile as I pulled up to my family reunion in my Mercedes, watching their jaws drop through the windows of Grandma Eleanor's house. The inheritance they thought they'd stolen from me 10 years ago was now mine again, along with their dignity. Their faces turned pale when they realized whose house they were actually in, the granddaughter they'd excluded, betrayed, and dismissed. This day of reckoning had been 10 years in the making, and I was finally ready to collect. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know where you're from in the comments. Family betrayals like mine happen everywhere, and knowing we're not alone helps. Hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members, and let's continue this journey of how I turned the tables on those who should have had my back. I left my small Midwestern hometown of Mapleton right after high school. Unlike most people there who stayed within a 50-mile radius their entire lives, I had bigger dreams. Chicago was only 3 hours away, but it might as well have been another planet compared to our town of just under 12,000 people. I moved there to pursue a career in finance, something my family never really understood or supported. Numbers people don't come from our family, my mother Diane would say, as if being good at math was some kind of genetic impossibility for the Hayes family. Over the years, my visits home became less frequent. At first, I'd return every month, then every few months, then just major holidays. Each visit felt more strained than the last. My mother had remarried a man named Frank, who clearly wanted his own family traditions to take precedence. My Uncle Richard, always the self-appointed family patriarch since Grandpa died, would make pointed comments about city folks forgetting their roots. My Aunt Patricia would interrogate me about my love life, then look disappointed regardless of my answer. My cousins Bradley and Natalie grew increasingly distant, as if my choice to leave somehow betrayed them. Despite all this, I still expected to be included in family events. We were family after all. That's what I kept telling myself. So when I heard through my mother's brief, detached phone call that a big family reunion was being planned for August, I waited for my invitation. Days passed. Weeks. Nothing came. Then, a cryptic email arrived from my cousin Natalie. "Hey Sam, just checking if you're coming to the reunion next month? It would be nice to see you." That's how I found out I hadn't been officially invited. My own mother hadn't bothered to send me an invitation. I called her immediately. "Oh, I thought you wouldn't be interested," she said, her voice artificially light. "You're so busy with your important job in Chicago." "Mom, of course I'd want to know about a family reunion. Where's it being held?" A pause. Too long to be natural. "At your grandmother's house," she finally said. My grandmother Eleanor's house. The house she had left to me in her, 10 years ago. The house my family had pressured me out of claiming when I was young and vulnerable. The house that, as far as they knew, had been sold to an anonymous buyer 2 years ago when they could no longer afford the upkeep. What they didn't know was that I was that anonymous buyer. "Mom, who's organizing this? Uncle Richard?" Yes, he and Patricia thought it would be nice to have everyone together again. It's been 10 years since everything happened. 10 years since Grandma died. 10 years since they turned on me. After hanging up, I did something I'm not proud of, but it confirmed my suspicions. I created a fake Facebook profile and joined the family reunion planning group that Bradley had created. It wasn't hard to get accepted. I used my middle name and an old photo where I looked different enough. What I discovered made my blood boil. "Do we have to invite Samantha?" Bradley had written 3 months earlier. "She'll just make everyone uncomfortable." "Richard says no," Aunt Patricia replied. "She abandoned the family and that house years ago. She's made her choice." My own mother had responded. "I agree. She barely calls anymore. She's not interested in family matters." There were dozens of messages like this. Planning activities, food arrangements, sleeping accommodations. Discussions about inviting distant relatives I barely knew. But the consensus was clear. Samantha Hayes was not welcome. What hurt the most wasn't the exclusion itself. It was the casual way they discussed it, as if I'd done something terrible by leaving town and pursuing my dreams. As if I'd abandoned them, when in reality, they had abandoned me when I needed them most. As I scrolled through their messages, a plan began forming in my mind. They wanted to have their reunion at Grandma Eleanor's house? The house that should have been mine? The house that, secretly, was mine again? Perfect. Grandma Eleanor's Victorian house had been the center of our family life for as long as I could remember. Sunday dinners, Christmas celebrations, 4th of July barbecues. All happened under that roof and in that sprawling backyard. As a child, I'd spent countless hours exploring its nooks and crannies, from the window seat in the library where Grandma taught me to read, to the attic where we discovered trunks full of family heirlooms. Grandma and I had a special bond. She was the only one who encouraged my interest in numbers and finance. "You've got a good head for business, Sammy," she'd tell me while we played Monopoly. "Don't let anyone tell you different." When I was accepted to the University of Chicago with a scholarship, she was the one who drove me to buy my dorm supplies while my mother made excuses about being too busy. The thought of my family gathering in her house, celebrating without me, acting as if they had any right to be there, it was too much. I made my decision. I would attend this reunion, invited or not. And I would make sure they understood exactly whose house they were in. But I needed to be strategic. This wasn't just about showing up and causing a scene. This was about justice for Grandma Eleanor, for myself, and for the truth. I contacted the property management company I'd been using to maintain the house in my absence. "Kyle, I need you to set up some discreet cameras around the property before the family gathering next month."
Surveillance?
Kyle Anderson asked, his voice concerned. "Everything okay, Samantha?" "It will be," I assured him. "I just want to capture some genuine reactions. For posterity." Next, I called my lawyer, Dennis Taylor, who had helped me purchase the house through a shell company 2 years ago. "Dennis, I need all the documentation proving my ownership of Grandma's house. The original will, the purchase agreement, everything." "Planning a revelation?" he asked, knowing some of my family history. "Something like that," I replied. "It's time for the truth to come out." Finally, I took 2 weeks off work, booked a hotel in Mapleton, and prepared for a homecoming like no other. As I packed my bags, including the power suit I'd worn when I made junior partner at my firm, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. This confrontation was 10 years overdue. I was no longer the heartbroken 19-year-old they could bully and manipulate. I was coming home to reclaim what was mine, not just a house, but my place in the family narrative. They had written me out of their story. Now I was about to write myself back in, whether they liked it or not. The day of Grandma Eleanor's funeral was unusually bright for October. The sunshine felt wrong against the black clothes and somber faces. I remember thinking that Grandma would have appreciated the irony. She always said funerals should be held on beautiful days to remind everyone that life goes on. I was 19, just starting my freshman year at college, when I got the call that she had passed peacefully in her sleep. The funeral was a blur of faces and condolences, hands patting my shoulder, voices saying how sorry they were. But what stands out in my memory, sharp as a knife, was what happened afterward at the reading of the will. We gathered in Grandma's living room, the same room where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays. Attorney Dennis Taylor, a kind-faced man in his 50s who had been Grandma's lawyer for decades, sat at her writing desk with a folder in front of him. "Before I begin," he said, "Eleanor asked me to tell you all that she made these decisions with clear mind and full heart." Uncle Richard shifted impatiently in his seat. "We know all that, Dennis. Just get on with it." Dennis nodded and began reading. There were small bequests, jewelry to my female cousins, watches and cufflinks to the male ones, specific furniture pieces to my mother and her siblings. Cash amounts that seemed generous, but not extraordinary. Then came the bombshell. To my granddaughter Samantha Hayes, who has shown wisdom beyond her years and courage to forge her own path, I leave my house and property at 415 Maple Street, along with its contents not otherwise specified in this will. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. Then Uncle Richard exploded. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, his face turning red. "She's manipulated an old woman. She's 19, for God's sake. What does she need a house for? Aunt Patricia burst into tears, her makeup running down her cheeks. Mom promised me her china cabinet and the dining set. Those are in the house. This isn't fair. Dennis remained calm. Those specific items are yours, Patricia, as stated earlier. Samantha inherits the house and non-bequeathed contents. She put ideas in Mom's head. Uncle Richard continued, pointing at me accusingly. Always hanging around, playing the devoted granddaughter while the rest of us were actually taking care of her. I found my voice, small and shaking. That's not true. I loved Grandma. I never asked for anything. Oh, you didn't have to ask, did you? Bradley sneered from across the room. Just had to bat your eyelashes and play the perfect granddaughter. Natalie, usually the kinder of my cousins, wouldn't even look at me. She stared at the floor, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. I looked to my mother, expecting her to defend me. Instead, she was shaking her head slowly. Samantha, did you know about this?
No.
Of course not. I was telling the truth. I had no idea Grandma had planned to leave me the house. It made no sense to me either. I was headed to college, not looking to settle down in Mapleton. I find that hard to believe, my mother said coldly. Her betrayal hurt worse than all the others combined. My father would have stood up for me, I thought. But he and Mom had divorced when I was 12, and though he sent child support faithfully, he had moved to Arizona with his new wife. He wasn't even at the funeral, having sent flowers and his regrets about not being able to travel. Uncle Richard paced the room like a prosecutor. Dennis, this can be contested, right? On grounds of undue influence. Dennis looked uncomfortable. You can try, Richard, but Eleanor was of sound mind. I personally verified that. She was very clear about her wishes. We'll see about that, Uncle Richard threatened. My mother would never have done this to her own children. Not without someone whispering in her ear. He glared at me. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Family members who had hugged me at the funeral now avoided me in town. Rumors spread that I had manipulated Grandma Eleanor into changing her will. Uncle Richard consulted with another lawyer and threatened a lengthy legal battle. You'll spend everything you inherit on legal fees, he warned me over the phone. Is that what you want? To bankrupt yourself defending a house you don't even need? You're in college. Be reasonable. My mother was no better. Honey, you should just sign the house over to Richard. He and Patricia grew up there.
It means so much more to them than it could to you.
But Grandma wanted me to have it. I protested, though my resolve was weakening under the constant pressure. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly, Mom insisted. She was old, Samantha. Sometimes elderly people make strange decisions. Every day brought a new phone call, a new guilt trip. I was too young and inexperienced to fight back effectively. Dennis advised me to stand my ground, but he was just one voice against the chorus of family members demanding I give up the house. The breaking point came when Uncle Richard showed up at my dorm room unannounced. This family feud is distracting you from your studies, he said, looking around my small room with distaste. Your future is here, in education, not in managing a property back home. He slid some papers across my desk. Sign these, and we can all move on. The family can heal. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and feeling completely alone. Dennis had warned me not to sign anything without his review, but the pressure was overwhelming. I need to think about it, I said weakly. There's nothing to think about, Uncle Richard insisted. You're being selfish, Samantha. Is that how your grandmother raised you? To tear apart a family over a house. In the end, I didn't sign that day, but I did something almost as damaging. I told Uncle Richard the first would consider relinquishing my claim if the family would stop attacking me. It was a moment of weakness that he interpreted as surrender. He left looking triumphant, and within hours, my phone was buzzing with messages from relatives congratulating me on doing the right thing and putting family first. They thought it was over. They thought they had won. What they didn't know was that I called Dennis that night, crying but determined. I can't fight them all, Dennis. They're making my life hell. What do you want to do, Samantha? He asked gently. I want to let them think they've won. I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. But I don't want to give up what Grandma intended for me. There was a pause before Dennis spoke again. There might be a way. It won't be easy, and you'll need to play a long game. Are you prepared for that? I am, I said, wiping away my tears. And that's how my secret plan began. Officially, I appeared to give up my claim to the house. Papers were signed that gave my family the right to use the property, but with careful wording crafted by Dennis that preserved my underlying ownership. To my family, it looked like surrender. To Dennis and me, it was strategic retreat. I left Mapleton seemingly defeated, with my family believing they had successfully bullied me out of my inheritance. Little did they know that I was just biding my time, getting stronger, and planning to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I felt a pang of guilt at the thought of Grandma seeing me apparently give in, but something told me she would understand. She had always taught me that sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. And this war was far from over. If you've ever had to walk away temporarily to gather your strength, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Sometimes retreat isn't surrender, it's strategy. The journey was just beginning, and I needed to become someone stronger before I could face them again. Chicago welcomed me with its towering skyscrapers and fast-paced energy, the perfect place to reinvent myself. With Grandma Eleanor's betrayal still fresh, I threw myself into my studies and then my career with single-minded determination. If my family thought I was just a naive girl they could push around, I would prove them wrong by becoming someone they couldn't ignore. My first job after graduating was entry-level at Wellington Financial Group, a mid-sized firm downtown. The pay was modest, the hours long, and the work often tedious, but I approached every spreadsheet and coffee run with the same intensity. While other new hires complained about staying late, I volunteered for extra projects, soaking up knowledge like a sponge. "You're different from the others," observed Barbara Henderson, a senior financial analyst who became my mentor. She was in her 50s, sharp as a tack, with a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of Grandma Eleanor. "Most kids your age want everything handed to them. You act like you've got something to prove." "Maybe I do," I admitted during one of our late-night working sessions. Barbara studied me over her reading glasses. "Family issues?" I nodded, not ready to share details. "Well, success is the best revenge," she said, turning back to her computer. "So, let's make sure you succeed." Under Barbara's guidance, I learned not just technical skills but office politics, client management, and investment strategy. Within 3 years, I was promoted twice. By year 5, I was managing my own small team. My salary tripled from my starting pay, and I began making careful investments of my own. All the while, I maintained sporadic contact with my family back in Mapleton. Birthday calls with my mother grew shorter each year. She would share sanitized updates about everyone. Uncle Richard's hardware store, Aunt Patricia's garden club achievements, Bradley's job at the local bank, Natalie's 2 children. What she didn't know was that I was gathering information through other channels. I made friends with Amanda Wilson, who had graduated a year ahead of me and still lived in Mapleton. Through our occasional coffee dates when I visited, I learned that Uncle Richard's business was struggling. Big box stores had cut into his customer base. Aunt Patricia's husband had health problems that their insurance wasn't fully covering. Bradley had been passed over for promotion 3 times. More importantly, I discovered that my family had been renting out Grandma's house to tourists through a vacation rental website. They were treating my inheritance as their own personal cash cow while letting the property deteriorate. Amanda sent me photos showing peeling paint, an overgrown garden, and renovations that would have made Grandma Eleanor cringe, cheap fixtures replacing the antique ones she had carefully preserved. "It's such a shame what they're doing to Eleanor's beautiful home," Amanda told me during one of our calls. "Everyone in town remembers how immaculate she kept it." The news hurt, but it also strengthened my resolve. I hadn't given up my claim to the house just to see it neglected and exploited. During my 7th year in Chicago, an opportunity arose. Through Barbara's network, I connected with Kyle Anderson, a property manager in Mapleton who had started his own real estate investment company. Over several careful meetings, I explained my situation and proposed a partnership. So you want to buy your own house, through my company, without your family knowing it's you? Kyle clarified during our third meeting. Exactly, I confirmed. They've been renting it out without proper maintenance. I want to reclaim it, restore it, but not reveal myself as the owner yet. Kyle scratched his beard thoughtfully. It's unusual, but not illegal. We create an LLC that makes the purchase, with you as the silent owner. But why not just confront them? I thought about the years of built-up resentment, the casual cruelty of their exclusion, the way they had manipulated a grieving 19-year-old. I want them to understand what they've done, I explained. A quick confrontation won't accomplish that. They need to feel what I felt, the slow realization that something precious has been taken from them. Kyle nodded slowly. I can respect that, but it won't be cheap. Property values in Mapleton have increased, and buying them out will cost significantly more than the house was worth when your grandmother left it to you. I've been saving and investing for exactly this purpose, I assured him. Money won't be an issue. And it wasn't. My years of disciplined saving, smart investments guided by Barbara, and 3 substantial bonuses had given me the financial freedom to reclaim what was mine. The purchase went through a month later, with Kyle's company making what appeared to be a standard business acquisition of a vacation rental property. The family's reaction was everything I had hoped for. Through Amanda and Kyle, I heard about Uncle Richard's red-faced fury when he received the notice that the new owner would not be renewing their management agreement. Aunt Patricia apparently cried at having to move the remaining family heirlooms they had stored in the basement. My mother called me for the first time in months, her voice tight with suppressed anger. Did you hear about your grandmother's house? Some investment company bought it. Probably turn it into condos or something equally horrible. That's too bad, I said, feigning ignorance. But wasn't it just an income property for Uncle Richard at this point? That's not the point, she snapped. It was part of our family history. I bit back the response I wanted to give, that they should have thought about family history before pushing me out and exploiting Grandma's house. Instead, I simply said, "Things change, Mom. Nothing stays the same forever." With the house back in my possession, Phase 2 of my plan began. I hired James Wilson, Amanda's husband and a respected local contractor, to restore the house to its former glory. I swore both James and Amanda to secrecy, explaining just enough of my history that they understood the importance of discretion. "We'll make it even better than before," James promised during our initial walkthrough. The house needed substantial work. The family had taken shortcuts on repairs, and some original features had been damaged or removed. Over the next 2 years, I made secret trips to Mapleton, staying in a hotel on the outskirts of town, and visiting the house only when I was certain no family members would be around. James kept me updated with photos and videos, but seeing the transformation in person was emotional each time. The ornate crown-molding Grandma had loved was restored. The hardwood floors were refinished to their original honey glow. The kitchen was updated with high-end appliances that complemented rather than clashed with the vintage cabinetry. The gardens were brought back to life according to old photos I found in Grandma's albums, which I had thankfully taken with me to college. Most importantly, I had Grandma Eleanor's master bedroom restored exactly as it had been, down to the wallpaper pattern and the position of her reading chair by the window. Her clothes were long gone, but I found similar vintage pieces that captured her elegant, timeless style. I even tracked down an antique vanity that matched the one she had used every day to apply her signature coral lipstick. As the renovation neared completion, I made my boldest move yet. Through Kyle, I let it be known that the investment company would consider allowing a family event to be hosted at the property for the right price. Uncle Richard, always concerned with appearances and eager to host the upcoming family reunion somewhere impressive, took the bait. He has no idea he's renting his own family home from the niece he tried to disinherit, Kyle chuckled after the agreement was signed. This is better than those revenge movies my wife watches. It's not about revenge, I corrected him, though part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. It's about justice and closure. As the date of the family reunion approached, I finalized my preparations. I bought a new car, nothing flashy enough to seem like showing off, but nice enough to communicate success. I selected my wardrobe carefully, professional but not intimidating, confident but not arrogant. I rehearsed what I would say when faced with the people who had betrayed me, trying to find the balance between assertiveness and grace that Grandma Eleanor had always embodied. The night before I was set to return to Mapleton for the reunion, Barbara called to wish me luck. "Remember," she said, "the best revenge isn't just success. It's success with class." I took a deep breath, thinking of Grandma Eleanor and hoping she would be proud of the woman I had become. I won't forget. While I was building my career in Chicago, my family was busy rewriting history back in Mapleton. Through social media monitoring and occasional conversations with old friends, I witnessed how they systematically erased me from the family narrative. Uncle Richard became the primary architect of this revisionist family history. At holiday gatherings, which I learned about through posted photos, he would raise toasts to those who stuck by the family through thick and thin, a pointed exclusion of the niece who had abandoned them for city life. When neighbors or friends asked about me, he would shake his head sadly and say, "Samantha chose a different path. She doesn't make time for family anymore." My mother Diane, who should have defended me, instead embraced her role in my new stepfamily. Her husband Frank had 2 adult children from a previous marriage, and photos showed Mom enthusiastically participating in their family events, calling Frank's grandchildren her grandchildren online, while barely acknowledging my existence in her occasional brief calls. "You should see little Emma," she would gush about Frank's granddaughter. "She's so bright, gets all A's in school." The implied comparison to my academic achievements, which Mom had never praised, wasn't subtle. Through my fake Facebook account, I watched Cousin Bradley's transformation from the boy who had resented my academic success to a man bitter about his own stagnation. His posts alternated between showing off modest achievements and making veiled references to family members who thought they were too good for Mapleton. "Some people forget where they came from," he wrote beneath a photo of himself in front of Uncle Richard's hardware store. "But real success is measured by loyalty, not a paycheck." The post received likes from all my family members. Aunt Patricia proved particularly venomous in her campaign against me. Amanda reported overhearing her at the salon describing me as that ungrateful girl who broke her mother's heart by running off to Chicago and never looking back. She didn't even call when Diane had her gallbladder surgery, Patricia told anyone who would listen, conveniently omitting that no one had informed me about the surgery until weeks afterward. The most painful discovery came through James, who was working on Grandma's house. While replacing damaged floorboards in the attic, he found a box of my childhood mementos, report cards, art projects, photographs that Grandma had saved. Instead of setting these aside for me, my family had relegated them to the attic alongside broken furniture and outdated electronics. "I found something you might want," James told me during one of my secret visits to oversee renovations. He handed me the dusty box with an apologetic smile. It was buried under a bunch of junk. Inside were treasures that brought tears to my eyes. The watercolor painting of Grandma's garden I'd made in 4th grade. My perfect math test that she had proudly displayed on her refrigerator. Photos of us baking cookies together. These precious memories had been discarded while my family claimed I was the one who didn't care about our history. But the betrayals went beyond mere words and symbolic gestures. Through Kyle's management company, I discovered that my family had been planning to sell their house just before I secretly purchased it. Uncle Richard's hardware store was in serious financial trouble, and he had been counting on the house sale to bail him out. He was shocked when we made the offer first, Kyle told me. He'd been talking to developers about tearing it down for a multi-unit property, but they were dragging their feet on making an offer. The thought of Grandma Eleanor's beloved home being demolished for cookie-cutter apartments made me physically ill. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about preserving something precious that my family was willing to destroy for profit. Perhaps the most revealing betrayal came 6 months before the planned reunion. Cousin Natalie accidentally sent me a text message clearly intended for Bradley. "Do you think we could get Sam to sign final release papers at the reunion? Richard says we need her signature to clear up the title issues from Grandma's will for insurance purposes." I stared at my phone in disbelief. They weren't including me in the reunion out of family feeling. They wanted legal documentation to permanently sever my rights to the property they didn't realize I already owned again. When I didn't respond, Natalie sent a flustered follow-up. Sorry, Sam. Meant that for Brad. But since I messaged you by mistake, would be great to see you at the family thing this summer if you can make it. I replied with deliberate vagueness. Thanks for thinking of me, Nat. I'll check my calendar. That text confirmed what I had suspected. The family reunion was partly designed as a trap, a way to get me to sign away any remaining legal claim I might have to Grandma's property. They had no idea that I was now their landlord, that the papers they were so eager for me to sign would be meaningless. As the date approached, I monitored the family's preparations through the reunion planning group. Uncle Richard had been corresponding with Mr. Anderson, actually Kyle, about specific requirements for the event. He requested access to the house a day early to set up family photographs and memorabilia. Kyle forwarded me these messages with his own commentary. Your uncle is quite demanding for someone who's essentially asking permission to bring photos into his niece's house. Indeed, Uncle Richard had specific requirements about furniture arrangement, access to various rooms, and even a request to temporarily remove some of the new owners' decorative items to make room for family photos. What he didn't know was that many of those decorative items were actually Grandma Eleanor's possessions that I had carefully tracked down and repurchased from antique stores and estate sales across 3 states. The final twist of the knife came when I saw the digital invitation they created for the reunion. It featured a stylized drawing of Grandma Eleanor's house with the words, Hayes Family Reunion, coming home after 10 years. Below, in smaller text, celebrating the legacy of Eleanor Hayes and the family bonds that keep us together. The irony was almost too much to bear. They were celebrating family bonds while deliberately excluding a family member. They were honoring Grandma Eleanor's legacy while ignoring her explicit wishes. They were coming home to a house that no longer belonged to them, but to the very person they had excluded. When Kyle showed me the final rental agreement Uncle Richard had signed, I couldn't help but laugh at the signature line, Mapleton Heritage Properties, LLC, represented by K. Anderson. My family had unknowingly entered into a contract with me, agreeing to my terms for using my house. The paperwork all checks out, Kyle assured me. They've paid the rental fee, signed the liability waivers, and agreed not to make any permanent changes to the property. Legally, you're completely protected when you make your grand entrance. As the reunion date grew closer, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anxiety about confronting the people who had hurt me so deeply. Satisfaction at knowing I held cards they didn't know existed. Sadness that it had come to this. That my family had made such a confrontation necessary. I wondered briefly if I was taking things too far, if I should just let go of the past and move forward without this dramatic revelation. But then I would remember Grandma Eleanor's face when she told me, Stand up for yourself, Sammy. No one else will do it for you if you don't. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It wasn't even just about an inheritance. It was about truth, about consequences for actions, about refusing to let others rewrite your story. My family had spent 10 years pretending I was the villain who abandoned them, when in reality, they had pushed me away and then blamed me for being gone. If you've ever been miscast as the bad guy in your own family story, you know exactly how it feels to have your truth buried under convenient lies. Sometimes setting the record straight isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. As the family reunion date approached, my preparation became almost military in its precision. I created spreadsheets tracking every detail, what to wear, what documents to bring, what to say to each family member. Barbara would have been proud of my methodical approach. For my outfit, I chose a navy blue dress that projected confidence without ostentation, paired with the pearl earrings Grandma Eleanor had given me for my 16th birthday. I had my hair styled in a sophisticated updo, different from the ponytail my family would remember. My makeup would be subtle but polished, sending the message that I had evolved from the girl they had bullied 10 years ago. The legal documentation was organized in a leather portfolio, Grandma's original will, the deed showing my ownership through Mapleton Heritage Properties, LLC, and records of all the restoration work. Dennis had provided a concise summary of the legal situation that even Uncle Richard, with his inflated sense of legal knowledge, would understand. Remember, Dennis advised during our final call, stay calm no matter what they say. The moment you lose your temper, you lose the upper hand. I also prepared the house itself for the confrontation. With James and Amanda's help, I arranged for Grandma Eleanor's portrait, restored and reframed, to be hung prominently in the entryway where it had always been during her lifetime. The family photos I had discovered in the attic were cleaned, framed, and placed throughout the house, including several of me with Grandma that the family had hidden away. In the living room, I positioned Grandma's favorite wingback chair facing the main sofa, where I knew Uncle Richard would hold court. On the side table next to it, I placed her reading glasses and favorite book of poetry. Subtle reminders of whose house this really was. The hidden cameras Kyle had installed would capture everything, not for legal purposes, but for my own record. I wanted to remember their faces when they realized what had happened, when the truth finally broke through their decade of lies. 2 days before the reunion, I drove the 3 hours from Chicago to Mapleton, taking the scenic route through golden cornfields and small towns that looked frozen in time. As the familiar water tower came into view, announcing, "Welcome to Mapleton, where neighbors are friends," I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and dread. I checked into the Mapleton Inn, a modestly renovated motel on the edge of town. The young woman at the front desk didn't recognize me, a small blessing in a town where gossip traveled faster than internet signals. "In town for the Hayes family reunion?" she asked as she handed me my key card. My surprise must have shown on my face. "Sorry," she laughed.
Small town.
"Everyone knows about big gatherings. Plus, my boyfriend's catering it." "Yes," I said after a moment. "It's been a long time since I've seen everyone." "Well, enjoy your stay, Ms. Bennett," she said, using the fake name I had registered under. That evening, I drove past Grandma's house, my house, staying far enough away to avoid notice. Cars were already parked outside. Through Kyle, I knew Uncle Richard had arrived early to supervise the setup, as if it were still his domain to control. Lights glowed warmly in the windows I had replaced, illuminating the freshly painted exterior and restored gingerbread trim. The gardens James had replanted according to Grandma's original design were in full summer bloom. It looked exactly as it had in my childhood memories, but better, preserved not in amber, but in living, breathing care. I allowed myself a moment of pride. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had rescued Grandma Eleanor's legacy from neglect and exploitation. I had honored her wishes, even if it had taken 10 years to do so. The morning of the reunion dawned bright and clear, another beautiful day for family reckoning, just as Grandma's funeral had been. I took my time getting ready, following my carefully planned schedule. Hair appointment at 9. Final fitting adjustments to my dress at 11. Lunch alone at the small cafe where Grandma and I used to share chocolate milkshakes after shopping trips. By 3 o'clock, I was parked a block away from the house, watching through binoculars as family members arrived. Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia were already there, of course, directing everyone like generals commanding troops. My mother arrived with Frank, carrying a casserole dish, claiming territory through food, a classic Midwest maneuver. Bradley pulled up in a truck that had seen better days, his wife Jessica and their 3 children piling out with bags of chips and soda. Natalie came with her husband Todd and their 2 children, looking harried and uncomfortable. Extended family members I barely recognized arrived in waves, second cousins, great-aunts, distant relatives connected by marriages and divorces I had lost track of. They all entered Grandma's house, my house, with the entitlement of people who believed they belonged there. At exactly 4:30, when the reunion would be in full swing according to the schedule I had seen online, I made my move. I drove my car slowly down the street, parking directly in front of the house where everyone would see. I checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the summer sunshine. The front door was open, with only the screen door closed to keep insects out. a Mapleton tradition during summer gatherings. Through it, I could hear the buzz of conversation, laughter, the clink of glasses and plates. Country music played softly in the background, Grandma's favorite Johnny Cash album, I realized with a pang. I didn't knock. I simply opened the screen door and walked in, the way you do when you're entering your own home. The conversation nearest the door stopped first, then spread like a wave of silence through the crowded living room and into the dining room beyond. Faces turned toward me one by one, expressions morphing from confusion to recognition to shock. Samantha? My mother was the first to speak, her voice higher than normal. She stood frozen, casserole serving spoon in hand. "Hi, Mom," I said calmly. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic from Chicago was terrible." Uncle Richard pushed through the crowd, his face already flushing with anger. "What are you doing here? This is a private family event." I smiled, channeling Grandma Eleanor's quiet confidence. "I know. That's why I'm here. I'm family, after all." "You weren't invited," Bradley said bluntly from where he leaned against the fireplace, Grandma's fireplace, where she had hung our stockings every Christmas. "Actually, Natalie mentioned it to me," I replied, nodding toward my cousin who looked like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. Besides, I wouldn't miss the chance to welcome everyone to my home. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children, sensing the tension, stopped their playing and whispering. Aunt Patricia laughed nervously. "Your home? Samantha, what are you talking about? This property belongs to Mapleton Heritage Properties. I finished for her. Which belongs to me." And with that simple statement, the day of reckoning had truly begun. The silence that followed my announcement was so complete you could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same clock that had counted out the minutes of my childhood visits to Grandma Eleanor. Uncle Richard recovered first, his face transitioning from shocked white to angry red. "That's ridiculous. This house was purchased by a real estate investment company 2 years ago." "Yes," I agreed pleasantly. "My real estate investment company, which I created specifically to buy back the house that Grandma left to me 10 years ago. The house that all of you pressured me into relinquishing when I was too young and vulnerable to fight back." I opened my leather portfolio and withdrew the property deed, holding it up so everyone could see the official seal. "Would anyone like to examine the documentation? I have copies for everyone." "This is some kind of trick," Bradley declared, pushing off from the fireplace and approaching me with the same intimidating posture he had used when we were children, and he wanted to scare me away from the last cookie. "You can't afford a house like this. You're bluffing." I raised an eyebrow. "Am I? I've been a senior financial analyst at Wellington Financial Group for the past 5 years, Bradley. I make more in quarterly bonuses than you do in a year at Mapleton Community Bank." His face flushed at the accuracy of my assessment. Behind him, his wife Jessica looked between us with new interest. My mother stepped forward, her hands fluttering nervously. "Samantha, honey, if this is true, why all the secrecy? Why not just tell us you bought the house?" "The same reason you didn't tell me about this reunion, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice level despite the emotion building in my chest. "Because this family stopped being honest with each other a long time ago." Aunt Patricia made a sound of indignation. "That's not fair, Samantha. You're the one who moved away and barely kept in touch." "Really, Aunt Patricia? Let's talk about fair." I moved further into the room, standing beside Grandma Eleanor's portrait where everyone could see me. "Was it fair when you all turned against me after Grandma died? When you spread rumors that I had manipulated her into changing her will? When you made me feel so unwelcome in my own hometown that I had no choice but to leave?" I turned to face the extended family members who were watching in stunned silence. "What you might not know is that Grandma Eleanor left this house to me in her will. These people," I gestured to Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, my mother, and Bradley, "decided that a 19-year-old college student didn't deserve her inheritance. They threatened legal action, spread lies about me, and made my life so miserable that I signed papers giving them usage rights to the property while I was still technically the owner." Uncle Richard stepped forward aggressively. That's a twisted version of what happened. Your grandmother wasn't thinking clearly when she made that will. We were protecting her real intentions. Is that so? I walked to the built-in bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound journal. This is Grandma Eleanor's diary from the year before she died. James found it during renovations, hidden in a compartment in her desk that you apparently never discovered while you were busy renting out her home to strangers. I opened to a marked page and read aloud. Spoke with Dennis about my will today. Richard will be angry that I'm leaving the house to Samantha, but she's the only one who truly loves this place for what it is, not what it's worth. The others see dollar signs. She sees home. My mother sank into a nearby chair, her face pale. Mom never told me that. She shouldn't have had to, Mom, I said quietly. You should have trusted that your mother knew what she was doing. You should have supported your daughter instead of joining the attack against me. Cousin Natalie stepped forward, her expression conflicted. Sam, I'm sorry about the text message. I didn't know the whole story. Did you know about this? Uncle Richard demanded, turning on her. Know about what? Natalie asked. That Samantha somehow tricked us into renting her own house for this reunion, Aunt Patricia interjected, her voice shrill. This whole thing was a setup. I shook my head. No, Aunt Patricia. The setup was when you decided to have a family reunion and explicitly excluded me. The setup was when you planned to use this occasion to get me to sign away my remaining legal rights, according to the text Natalie accidentally sent me. Gasps and murmurs spread through the room. Several relatives looked uncomfortable, clearly hearing this information for the first time. Is that true, Richard? Asked Great-Aunt Helen, Grandma Eleanor's sister, who had traveled from Florida for the reunion. You were going to trick Samantha into signing legal papers? Uncle Richard's face grew even redder. It wasn't like that. We just needed to clear up some lingering title issues. By deliberately excluding me from the invitation list, then hoping I'd show up anyway? I challenged him. That doesn't make sense, Uncle Richard. Unless you were planning to ambush me. I turned to address the whole room again. For 10 years, you've been telling people I abandoned this family. That I was selfish, ungrateful, that I thought I was too good for Mapleton. But the truth is you pushed me out and then blamed me for being gone. I walked to the sideboard where family photos had been arranged, photos that conspicuously excluded me. From my portfolio, I withdrew several framed pictures of my own, me with Grandma Eleanor in her garden, me at my college graduation, standing alone because no family members had attended, me at my first apartment in Chicago, making a life for myself after being rejected by the people who should have supported me. While you were erasing me from the family history, I continued, placing my photos among theirs. I was working 80-hour weeks, earning promotions, saving every extra dollar, so I could one day reclaim what Grandma wanted me to have. Not out of greed, but because she trusted me to preserve her home and her legacy. I gestured around at the lovingly restored rooms. Look at what you did to this place when you thought it was yours. You rented it out to strangers. You replaced Grandma's carefully chosen fixtures with cheap alternatives. You were even planning to sell it to developers who would have demolished it. We had financial considerations, Uncle Richard protested, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. So did I countered. But I found a way to honor Grandma's wishes without destroying what she loved. I worked hard, saved, invested, and eventually bought back the house that should have been mine all along. And then I restored it to what it was meant to be. Bradley, always quick to anger, stepped toward me. So what now? You're going to kick us all out? Make us beg for forgiveness? What's your endgame here, Samantha? I met his gaze steadily. My endgame, as you put it, is truth. For 10 years, you've controlled the narrative. You've made me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. Today, that ends. I turned to address the extended family. I don't expect everyone to understand or take sides. Many of you barely know me because I was kept away, intentionally excluded from family events just like this one. But I want you to know that everything I did was to honor Grandma Eleanor and protect what she entrusted to me. Unexpectedly, Cousin Natalie stepped to my side. I believe you, Sam. And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you back then. We were all following Uncle Richard's lead without questioning. Her husband Todd nodded in agreement. The way they've talked about you over the years never sat right with me. You were just a kid when all this happened. Uncle Richard's face contorted with fury. This is ridiculous. She disappears for 10 years, then shows up to ambush us and play the victim. I think we all know who the real victim is here, Richard, said Great Aunt Helen, her voice sharp despite her 80 years. Eleanor would be ashamed of how you've treated her granddaughter. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. The tide was turning. My mother stood up suddenly, tears streaming down her face. I failed you, Samantha. I should have protected you, but I was so wrapped up in my new life with Frank, so worried about keeping peace with Richard and Patricia. I convinced myself you were strong enough to handle it on your own. She choked back a sob. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. Her words hit me like a physical blow. For 10 years, I had imagined this confrontation, but never once had I envisioned my mother apologizing. Before I could respond, Uncle Richard grabbed his jacket from the coat rack. This is absurd. I'm not staying here to be accused and judged in front of everyone. Patricia, we're leaving. Aunt Patricia looked torn, glancing between her husband and the rest of the family. After a moment's hesitation, she collected her purse and followed him. Anyone else who wants to know the truth about Samantha's schemes can join us at our house, Uncle Richard announced from the doorway. The rest of you enjoy being manipulated. But instead of a mass exodus, only a few people moved to follow. Bradley and his family, a couple of cousins who had always been in Uncle Richard's orbit. The majority stayed, looking between me and the departing group with varying degrees of confusion and interest. As the front door slammed behind Uncle Richard, an unexpected voice broke the tension. I've known Samantha since we were kids, said Cousin Bradley, stopping at the threshold while his wife and children continued to the car. And she's always been smart, too smart for her own good sometimes. But she's never been a liar. He turned to me, his expression a complex mix of resentment and respect. I didn't want to believe Grandma favored you, but maybe she just saw something in you that the rest of us missed. With that surprising admission, he followed his family outside, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. I took a deep breath, feeling lightheaded with the release of 10 years of pent-up emotions. I didn't come here to break up the reunion, I said to those who remained. I came to reclaim my place in this family and in this house. Those who want to stay are welcome. This is my home, but it's also Grandma Eleanor's legacy to our entire family. She would want us to gather here, to make new memories together. There was a moment of uncertainty, then Great Aunt Helen raised her glass. To Eleanor, she said firmly, and to Samantha, who is more of her grandmother in her than anyone realized. To Eleanor and Samantha, echoed around the room, and just like that, the reunion continued, smaller, changed, but perhaps more authentic than it would have been. As people began to relax and conversation resumed, my mother approached me again, her eyes red from crying. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Somewhere private? I nodded, leading her to Grandma Eleanor's study. The one room in the house I had kept exactly as it was during her lifetime, right down to the half-finished crossword puzzle on her desk. As I closed the door behind us, I knew that the real work of healing, or deciding which relationships could be healed and which needed to remain in the past, was just beginning. The days following the confrontation were a blur of emotional conversations, tentative reconciliations, and difficult decisions. After the dramatic departure of Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, and their immediate supporters, the remaining family members and I salvaged what we could of the reunion. There were awkward moments, certainly, but also genuine connections as relatives who had only known me through the distorted lens of others' stories got to meet the real Samantha Hayes. My mother and I had the first of many difficult conversations in Grandma Eleanor's study that evening. Surrounded by the books and mementos of the woman who had loved us both, we began the painful process of excavating 10 years of misunderstandings and hurt. I convinced myself I was protecting you, Mom admitted, her hands clutching a tissue. Richard was so adamant that the will would be overturned, that fighting it would drain your college fund and leave you with nothing. I thought I was helping by encouraging you to walk away. You could have stood by me, I said, the words carrying the weight of a decade's disappointment. You chose everyone else over your own daughter. She nodded, tears falling freely. After your father left, I was so afraid of being alone. Richard and Patricia were my safety net. I couldn't risk opposing them, even when I knew they were wrong. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. It's not an excuse. It's just the truth of my weakness. That admission, the recognition of her failure without defensive justification, was the first step toward a new kind of relationship between us. Not the immediate restoration of mother-daughter trust, but the beginning of an honest adult connection built on truth rather than obligation. The morning after the reunion, cousin Natalie arrived at my doorstep with coffee and apology muffins from the local bakery. I should have told you about the reunion directly, she said as we sat on the porch swing Grandma and I used to share. I knew excluding you was wrong, but I've always been a coward when it comes to standing up to Uncle Richard. We all were, I acknowledged. He ruled this family through fear and manipulation for so long that it became normal. Natalie's children, 8 and 6, played on the lawn while we talked, their innocent laughter a reminder of how family dynamics can change with each generation. What will you do with the house? She asked eventually. It's huge for one person, and you still live in Chicago, right? The question had been on my mind for months. The revenge I'd planned had been executed perfectly, but now that it was done, what came next? I've been thinking about turning it into a community center, I admitted, sharing a dream I hadn't yet articulated fully. Grandma always opened her home to people who needed help. Remember her literacy classes for immigrant families? Her after-school tutoring. Natalie nodded, her expression softening with memory. She taught Mrs. Ramirez English at this very table. I'd forgotten about that. I want to formalize what she started, I explained, warming to the idea as I spoke it aloud. The Eleanor Hayes Community Center, a place for education support groups, maybe even small business incubation for women entrepreneurs. She would have loved that, Natalie said softly. Over the next few days, more family members stopped by, some to apologize, others simply curious about my life and plans. I set clear boundaries, welcoming those who approached with genuine remorse or openness, keeping a polite distance from those who seemed merely interested in the gossip value of the situation. Uncle Richard made his move a week later, arriving unannounced in his Sunday best, clutching a folder of legal papers. I've consulted with my attorney, he began without preamble when I answered the door. There are serious questions about the legality of your purchase through a shell company. I didn't invite him in. Dennis Taylor has assured me that everything was done properly, Uncle Richard. But if you want to pursue legal action, that's your right. He seemed taken aback by my calm response. I'm trying to avoid unnecessary conflict, Samantha. I'm prepared to offer you a settlement that would be fair to everyone. I'm not interested in settlements, I told him. This house is mine, legally and morally. Grandma wanted me to have it. Your attempts to take it from me failed 10 years ago, and they'll fail now. His face darkened. You've turned the family against me, made me out to be some kind of villain.
No, Uncle Richard.
You did that yourself through years of manipulation and bullying. All I did was tell the truth. He left angry and unsatisfied, but I felt only relief. Some relationships weren't worth salvaging, and his was one of them. Aunt Patricia made a separate piece offering a few days later. A box of Grandma's china she had saved when they thought the house would be sold. I always meant to give these to you, she claimed, though we both knew it wasn't true. Your grandmother would want you to have them. I accepted the china, but not the rewritten history. Thank you for returning them to where they belong, I said simply. Cousin Bradley's approach surprised me most. He arrived one evening after work, still in his bank uniform, looking uncomfortable but determined. I've been a jerk, he said bluntly when I opened the door. For years. Since we were kids, really. I leaned against the doorframe, neither inviting him in nor sending him away. Why this sudden self-awareness? He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Watching you stand up to everyone at the reunion, It made me think about why I've always resented you. And the truth is, you had the courage to leave, to make something of yourself. I stayed and let Uncle Richard dictate my life, and now I'm stuck in a job I hate, wondering where my choices went.
His honesty disarmed me. "Come in," I said.
Let's talk. That conversation led to an unexpected alliance. Bradley had financial experience from the bank and local connections I lacked. When I shared my community center plans, he offered to help with the business model and fundraising. I need to do something that matters, he admitted. Something Grandma would have been proud of. As summer turned to fall, I made my decision. I would keep my job in Chicago but split my time between there and Mapleton. The Eleanor Hayes Community Center would become reality, with a board of directors that included family members who had demonstrated genuine change. Bradley, Natalie, even my mother, who had begun therapy to address her codependency issues. I hired Amanda Wilson as the center's first director, her background in community organizing making her perfect for the role. Her husband James continued maintaining the property, preserving its historic character while adapting spaces for new purposes. The grand opening was scheduled for the one-year anniversary of the reunion confrontation, a deliberate choice to transform a day of reckoning into one of renewal. Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia declined their invitations, as expected. But Great and Helen came from Florida, bringing cousins and second cousins I was just getting to know. My father, hearing about the events from my mother, flew in from Arizona with his wife, making his first trip back to Mapleton in 15 years. His pride in what I had accomplished was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated. As I cut the ribbon across the front door of what had once been Grandma Eleanor's house, then briefly my house, and now belonged in a sense to the whole community, I felt her presence strongly. The house was never the real inheritance, I said to the gathered crowd of family, friends, and townspeople. Grandma Eleanor left me something far more valuable, the courage to stand up for myself and the wisdom to know when to share what I have with others. My mother squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes, but a genuine smile on her face. Bradley and Natalie stood nearby with their families, part of my life again, but on new, healthier terms. Later that evening, after the celebration, I sat alone on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the garden Grandma had loved. The house behind me hummed with new purpose. Classrooms where her sitting rooms had been, a computer lab in the former dining room, support group circles gathering in spaces where family dramas had once played out. I thought about the journey of the past 11 years. The pain of betrayal. The lonely work of building myself up from nothing. The careful planning of my revenge. And finally, the unexpected outcome. Not just justice for myself, but healing for parts of my family and a gift to the community Grandma had cherished. My revenge had transformed into something more meaningful than I could have imagined. Not everyone deserved forgiveness, and I hadn't offered it universally. But for those willing to acknowledge their wrongs and change their behavior, I had found a way forward that honored both my boundaries and Grandma Eleanor's generous spirit. The weight I had carried for a decade had finally lifted. In reclaiming my inheritance, I had discovered my own capacity for resilience, for compassion, and for leadership. The house was still mine, but now it belonged to something bigger than ownership. It was part of a legacy that would outlive all of us. As night fell completely, I looked up at the stars, the same stars Grandma and I had named during summer evenings on this very swing, and whispered, "Thank you." For her gift, for her faith in me, and for the strength she had helped me find in myself. The porch light cast a warm glow around me, welcoming and steady, like a lighthouse guiding ships to safe harbor. Inside, Grandma Eleanor's portrait watched over the transformed space, her eyes kind but determined, just as I had become. If there's one thing my journey has taught me, it's that family isn't just defined by blood or names, but by who stands with you when it truly matters. I'd love to hear in the comments about times when you had to stand up to family members who weren't treating you right. Did you forgive them, or did you need to create boundaries? Every like on this video supports others finding strength in similar situations, and subscribing means you'll be part of our community sharing these important life lessons. Thank you for witnessing my story. May it give you courage in writing your own.